Good morning, everyone. We're going to open this study with a word of prayer. The dear Father in heaven, we invite your presence once again as we open your word. We are thankful for the light that has been shining upon us and the change that has been happening in our understanding of this message since January 11th. We are thankful, Lord, that as we study that Solomon, that we see things that we didn't see before. And so we pray for one another that you can help us as we continue to grow in your grace. And we ask, Lord, that you can help us through the difficulties that we all face day by day. Help us for today to have the bread that's sufficient thereof. And be with us now and guide in this study, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so before the study got started, we had discussed a bit about having a study on the Godhead, which is once I'm done the study on Revelation. On Sabbath, we're going to switch to that as a topic. And I don't really want to be leading out the whole time either, so I want you guys to think about maybe different parts that you would want to present, things that like Stephen might have something to present, Dwight might have some things that he wants to present, Angela, anybody, right? So one of the things that we do in our approach in how we study is that we are not the experts in anything. We are just students wanting to understand from God's word, and we study together. Unfortunately, I end up having to lead out quite a bit. One is probably have a bit more time to do lots of the preparation, but it's just the way it is. But I know that, as we've done other times, other people leading out. But for now, this study here, we're going through not 1 John chapter 5, but we're going through the story of the Queen of Sheba in 1 Kings chapter 6, or chapter 10, pardon me. 1 Kings chapter 10. And we learned some pretty interesting things yesterday. So we had sort of finished off chapter 9, which was connected with the study we were doing in 2 Chronicles on the same topic, dealing with the 20 years. So we finished that off. We understand that there's this 20 years for the temple and Solomon's house, and we're connecting this to our history by connecting it to Artaxerxes' decree, that history of Ezra, and then we also connected it to the temple, of course, the dedication of the temple to the temple, and then we connected it also. We connected also the first decree, and that was connected as well with the 20 years, right? So just going back here where it talks about down at the bottom. And it came to pass at the end of 20 years when Solomon had built the two houses, the house of the Lord and the king's house. So we remember that we have 20 years that's divided into 7 and 13 here, and we have that in the story of Artaxerxes. But we also have 20 years just by itself. It's not divided into 7 and 13, particularly, though there is some other structures there that Stephen had pointed out that we considered. But we can just look at the 20 years from Cyrus's decree to Darius's decree is also representing that history. So the point is we have Solomon as the third angel's message, encompassing all 3 decrees. Yet the focus with Solomon is upon the third angel's message. And the way that we have understood this is that Solomon is the third angel, which means he's not the first and the second. If we look at October 22nd, 1844, the first angel would be Saul, the second angel would be David, the third angel is Solomon. So we are looking at Solomon, we're not just looking at it zoomed into our history as part of some fractal, but we're looking at it overall as the history of Adventism. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't take some of the aspects of Solomon's history and apply it to our history. Now, I referenced this January 11th. So just to remind people that we had this 8,888 days, and I made the wild claim that since that ended on January 11th, and there was part of these other structures, that a change happens in the movement. But I didn't understand what that would be. It just seemed to me that we would be dealing with how we were working up to that time is we were dealing with very specific dates, counting the Hebrew numbers from September 11th. Now, the longest a Hebrew number goes is 8674. So obviously, the 8647 mean, you don't have any, that's as far as the numbers, that's the farthest number that we counted using the Hebrew numbers. But 8674 goes another, 27? Is that days past May, if I did the math right? So, but the 8888 is as far as we could go past 9/11, just as a symbol. And that was based upon the death of Charlie Kirk happened 8765 days after 9/11. And then we have this count where we went backwards. If everybody remembers all of that, I could bring up the chart, I guess. But the point is, we ended up with this July 11th or January 11th date. And so we believe that there's a change. And so when we're looking at this study, the thing that I want people to sort of think about and to focus on is that we're now not doing an autopsy on the movement that we were doing in the past, right? So before we were kind of going through what had happened with the movement and Jeff and Future for America and all of these things, right? Arminder, Tess, we spent a lot of time going over that. But now we're not focused on that. And we've moved away from that past. It's there, but we're focusing upon what God is now showing us as far as giving a message. Does that make sense to people of how I understand that? So I just wanted to clarify why I think we're going to be, when we're studying here, we're going to be seeing things a little bit different, a little bit more zoomed out. Does that seem fair?
I would say that it seems more logical at this point to address it in this way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I just think that's what we've seen happen. Right? Now, when we moved to Solomon, it happened to be on January 11th. Angela's asking a question here, just looking in the chat. And that wasn't really planned. Like, it's just how things unfolded. We ended up on January 11th, having the study on 1 Kings chapter 1 and moving to Solomon. So that was a change that happened in our studies. Okay, yeah, so Angela just has some comments. Yeah, so which we're going to have to look at, not in this study. Now, so then we had this 20 years. And then when we moved to the Queen of Sheba, well, we have their Sheba, right? So that's the word that means 7 or an oath, but it's not just the plain number 7. It's Sheba. It's a little bit different as far as the vowel pointings, but it has the same meaning as an oath. Now, oath is usually shabua, right? So people get a little bit confused there. But the word Sheba means 7 or an oath, right? And so it's got the same meaning. And okay, I'm going to make that bigger so people can see that. So we know that this has to do with the 7 times. Now, how do we take this then, and how did we do this? So we look at the 7 times. The 7 times comes in connection with our history. It becomes rejected. So we looked at if this is Adventist history, we have 1863. We have the 1863 prophetic chart, which doesn't have the 7 times on it, right? Which the first 2 charts do. The 1843 and 1850 chart have the 2520, the 7 times of Leviticus 26. They're basically Leviticus 26 charts. They're 2520 charts. The top date on both those charts is 677, right? Where the 2520 from Judah begins. But we have the prophetic mirror symbolically hidden on the 1863 chart in the week of Christ, but it's hidden. And we know that 7 years prior to that, we had what occurred, what happened significantly 7 years prior to 1863 in connection with the 2520.
The writing of the times of the Gentiles by Edson.
Yeah, so Hiram Edson published 7 articles on the times of the Gentiles, which was the basis for us understanding that there were 2 2520s. Even though Miller did recognize the 2520 for Northern Israel, he didn't quite fully understand it. And he definitely didn't incorporate it into the prophetic mirror that we have today. So we've taken Miller's 2520 and Hiram Edson's 2520, and we see that 7 years after he published his Times of the Gentiles, that 2520 prophetic mirror is going to be placed in the 1863 chart. But we know that is also has to do with Jericho. So what does the rebuilding of Jericho have to do with what we're talking about here in connection with building 7 years? How did we sort that out yesterday?
I was really blitzed when we were online yesterday. I don't know if you could tell, but since then I've been looking up the names of the cities that Solomon built, and Tadmor apparently means place of palms. So right there you'd have a link with Jericho.
Okay. So what we had gone through is I talked about the lines where we have a rebuilding that occurs. So after you have the third angel's message arrive, you have the number 7, right? The Sabbath. There's a covenant made, marriage, right? Things like that. And then we have a falling away that happens. And that's either in the story of the third angel, the third decree, we're going to have Nehemiah's decree, which is going to be a building. So sometimes there's a building, sometimes there's a destruction of a building. But we then say that we can parallel that Millerite history, Solomon, with Artaxerxes, right? The third decree. And in Artaxerxes, you're going to have the 7 and the 13, right? So you already have that structure there. And so in this history, when Solomon has completed his 13 years of building his house, and then he has the Queen of Sheba come, somehow this is connected. How we will do it, how we will ultimately come to understand it, I'm not certain. But this Queen of Sheba coming was an opportunity for Solomon, which he's not going to properly take advantage of, right? That there's a seed planted here, just as we had the seed with Hiram, king of Tyre, a seed that leads away. So the Queen of Sheba we often look at as a really good story, right? Solomon has done all of this wonderful stuff, and the Queen of Sheba comes, and she sees all of his wisdom, but yet we have some symbols in here that we have to consider. Okay, so we have the 7 times there. We have it in connection with that third angel's message and this building that goes on. So the building could be, so we have the Lord's house, which would refer in Adventism, if we're going to take the Lord's house refers to something and Solomon's house refers to something, what would the Lord's house refer to and what would Solomon's house refer to, I guess is the question. Would it be a different aspect of Adventism? Would 1863 be Solomon's house? Would the message, how would we look at that?
I'd step away for just a second. So are we saying Solomon's house being 1863, would that make 1856 the last true Adventism?
Well, it just means that there's something that's happening in that history that leads to 1863. I mean, true Adventism still exists.
No, I'm speaking of true Adventism that understands that the charts are like the tables, and that they're willing to and that they're willing to accept the charts and not reject the charts.
Yeah, and that's why Joseph Bates' response to the 1863 chart, though some people just take it as kind of joking, I don't think he was joking. James White's kind of takes it not seriously. You know, he says his interpretation of that passage in Isaiah that talks about writing in a book noted upon a table, that this is a rebellious house, you know.
Right.
That basically the 1863 chart, he's describing the reality of the 1863 chart, and that it is a rebellious house, and that it has rejected prophecy. So whether Bates fully understood what he was saying, I think he did. I think he saw what was happening, but he wasn't really in any position to do anything about it. And that others around him just couldn't see it, right? But, you know, I could be wrong. Maybe Bates just, you know, he just wrote it and didn't fully understand what he was saying. It's possible. But I think it is correct. So
I don't see that with the captain.
Yeah. But, you know, James White is taking him as joking, right? Or not, or at least he's not taking it seriously.
Yeah, he sort of says it will do no harm concerning what he wrote.
It will do no harm.
So there was something like that he said.
Yeah.
You do sort of sense that he kind of got a wee bit of a sort of conviction over it, or a wee bit of a sting from what he wrote.
Yeah. It's because you have to read into it, right?
Yeah, he seems to just sort of laughs it off, in the sense, puts a wee bit of a
that's the impression I got.
A joking tone, but you do think he maybe felt a wee bit of an impression of a sting from it.
Yeah, I mean, I
apologize, but I don't. Can you?
Yeah. Okay. You want to see this statement?
I want to know what y'all talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm distracted because I got water issues and stuff. So I apologize.
That's okay. Okay. So this is with the 1863 chart. Joseph Bates is going to write a letter to the review in. Is this it? It's not the right one. I gotta find this here. So he writes a letter to the review. And just want to get this. I know it's in 1863. So instead of searching everything, because there's too many things to read through. Somewhere in here. Okay. Joseph Bates writes lots of little notes, to the review.
I have it here.
Okay, where is it?
So it's in Advent Review and Sabbath Herald, March 29, 1864.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Here it is. Oh, no, I don't have it. March 29. Okay, for some reason, it's not showing up. Okay, so March 29, I'm going to have to this way, I guess. I just want to show the quote. Oh, I see.
You find it?
So it's 1864, right?
Yes.
That's what.
If you type in on reading the key to the prophetic chart, it should come up.
That's what we should have done. Okay, so this is a report from Brother Bates, right? That's the one?
Yeah.
Where he talks about the prophetic chart. Okay. These search things highlighting the prophetic chart. So he's going to talk about some things. And so he says the neatly finished symbols and order of the prophetic chart. Okay. Yeah. So on reading the key to the prophetic chart, which so few words comprehends and most strikingly delineates, which we got the word delineates, which means to set on the line, the pictorial illustrations of the visions of Daniel and John, together with the diagram of the great prophetic period of Daniel's 2300 days and clear proof of its commencement and also its termination in the past, I was forcibly impressed to read again what the prophet Isaiah foresaw would be written in a book in the latter day. Here it is, right? So I don't know Bates personally, but in reading stuff that he writes, he has a way about him in how he approaches topics. Have other people noticed that? He can be both direct and indirect at the same time. Does that make sense?
That's an interesting explanation.
Yeah. He directly beats around the bush sometimes. That's the way I look at it, in how he's written lots of the things that he's written that I've read. So to me, this fits in with his personality. So he's first going to just say, this is a great chart, right? But then he's going to give a rebuke that is pretty direct, I think. And I think some people misread this because they don't recognize that, he's presenting these positive things first because he is going to say some hard things. He's not going to come across as just a naysayer, a critical complainer, right? So that's the way I see him. But, I could be wrong. So he quotes the passage from Isaiah chapter 30, verse 8 to 10. It says, now go write it before them in a table and note it in a book, that it may be for a time to come forever and ever, that this is a rebellious people, lying children that will not hear the law of the Lord, which say to the seers, see not, and to the prophets, prophesy not, unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, prophesy deceits. Now, a person could say, well, Bates is just talking about the Christians that they're going to be presenting this to, that it's not a rebuke of the chart in any way, because he's said nice things about the chart. So that's how some people would interpret it. Now he says, those who are laboring to give correct views of the prophecies of Daniel and John, including the work of the sanctuary and the third angel's message, as delineated on the prophetic chart or in a table, are very often in company with the people and their seers, which the prophet has herein described. So what is he saying there? Is he giving a rebuke?
What if he's being sarcastic?
Well, I don't. I wouldn't use the word sarcastic in this case. I don't think he's quite using sarcasm, but he's trying to say in a gentle way that it applies to us who made the chart, right? Because we're the ones laboring to give the correct views on the prophecies of Daniel and John, right? Are we not often in the company with the people and their seers, which the prophet has herein described, right? Is it not true that those are that should be giving the message, that are supposed to be giving it, they're laboring, that they can be called rebellious people, lying children that will not hear the law of the Lord? I don't think it's sarcasm.
Very much so.
Yeah. I think it's really clear what he is saying. I don't think that he's just praising the chart and the people. He's not patting them on the back. He's giving a direct rebuke based on this verse. So, and then he's going to go back to the prophetic charts that we had in the past. It is a well-established fact that the prophetic charts have been used to explain from since they were first made plain on the tables in the year 1842. From this period to 1864, the explanation was written on the chart in connection with the symbols, right? Write the vision, make it plain upon tables, right? That he may run that readeth it. So one important difference or change has now taken place, but the explanation or words are noted in a book. Compare chapter 29, verse 11 and 12. And the vision is of all is become unto you as the words of a book, right? So what is that he's referring to in Isaiah chapter 29, verse 11? We probably should look at it. So this is starting verse 10. For the Lord hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes, and the prophets and your rulers and the seers hath he covered. And the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, Read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I cannot, for it is sealed. And the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, Read this, and I pray thee. And he saith, I am not learned. Wherefore the Lord said, Forasmuch as this people draw near me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. Okay? So if we take that into account to what Bates here is saying, because he's going to refer to that, he's definitely giving a rebuke regarding this prophetic chart, that it's now going to have these words written in a book. And are they going to be able to understand it? What are the learned going to say?
Aren't they going to reject it?
Yeah. But they reject it on what basis? When they brings the book to the learned, what do they say? It's sealed, right?
Agreed.
Okay. And then he brings it to the unlearned, and they say, oh, we're not learned. We're depending upon the church, the scholars, the Biblical Research Institute to present these truths to us. If they don't see any light in it, they say it's sealed. Well, what do we have to do with it? So we can see that the 1863 chart, and I make this argument not as well, because it wasn't as well developed, in my study on the 1843, 1850, and 1863 charts. So I did a series of 3 presentations at Concordia back in 2013, I believe. So at that time, I didn't fully understand all of this. But we can see then that the 1863 chart is not, it's not the image of jealousy, right? As Jeff tried to point it out, but it is actually just the sealing up of the message. So the Adventists in that generation had the ability to understand, the opportunity to understand the 7 thunders that were sealed up, but they didn't understand the 7 thunders. And so our generation is unsealing the 7 thunders, has unsealed them. We understand Millerite history now, but it wasn't understood in that time. So, so we can take now. Well, here's another thought. So we have the 7 years. Do we have the 20 years there?
I would think so.
Okay. How many years from the 1843 chart to the 1863 chart?
20 years.
Yeah. And then you got the 7 years at the end. So the 13 years is at the beginning, and then the 7 years at the end. Now, we could argue, the chart's made in 1842, but you understand what I'm saying. We still have that connection between 1843 and 1863 being 20 years.
Correct.
And then it's divided into 13 and 7. So I think that's pretty interesting. Stephen?
Just to note that this here date, the 29th of March, that's the 3rd day of the 1st month.
Okay, in that year on the biblical calendar.
So that's the date that Daniel begins his fast of 3 weeks.
Okay. Yeah, the
21.
To get the decree signed.
Okay.
Cyrus.
Ah, that's encouraging to me because that's my birthday and Kelly's.
Yeah. Now it's not always the third day of the first month in every year, but because in it's what, April 3rd in
Yeah, I think it's April, maybe the 2nd.
yeah, I can't remember.
Could be the 3rd, somewhere around there. Yeah, I think it's maybe the 2nd.
Yeah, okay. But anyway,
But
we can see
that's sort of connected then to the 7 times as well, isn't it? Because it's at the end of the 70 years.
yeah,
The second 7 times. The
yeah,
Cyrus then comes to the throne. And
yeah.
then that sort of marks the beginning of, well, he's going to issue that decree then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's lots of connections here, lots of different ways that in which my thoughts journey. But yeah, so he then says, now it can be shown that the prophetic chart is yet to be amended or rewritten, then it is not yet noted in a book named by the prophet. Now, if it can be shown that the prophetic chart is yet to be amended or rewritten, then it is not yet noted in a book named by the prophet. But if the prophetic chart is now correct and subject to no further alteration, but written in a table forever and ever, then is it not clear that this is also noted in a book? Right? So it's kind of an awkward sort of way he's saying it. But basically he's saying, if this is true, then the 1863 chart is this chart that's being talked about in Isaiah chapter 30, verse 8 to 10, right? But he's also implying that this is written in a book as a rebuke.
It was just a correction.
Yeah.
So I was looking actually at the Julian date rather than the Gregorian.
Okay.
So in the Gregorian, it's the 20th day of the 12th month.
Yeah, so it'd be the 20th day of the 12th month, which, because you just add 12 to the 3, right? So wouldn't that make it, so you said it was the 3rd, and then you're going to add, oh, yeah, we're going back the other direction. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay. Anyway, the point that we have here is, does this kind of satisfy you a little bit, William? You now know what we're talking about? If you're there.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that helps. So you can see. Yeah. So what we're making this argument, and that we were talking about yesterday, had to do with 1856. So then Stephen noted some things regarding the 666. I'm going to get over there back to. We're going to have all of this gold, right? And it's going to be 603 score and 6 talents of gold. Can you go over that again, Stephen? What you saw there? So you dealt with 1856.
Yeah, so 1856 minus 666 is 1,190.
Yeah.
So you have 911 symbol.
Yeah, and it's also, well, the fractal of the 11,900 days, right? And the 1,190 minutes and 142,810 days. That's 1,190 days less than 144,000 days, right?
Yeah.
People know what I'm talking about. So that 1190, that's the number of days after November 9th that your birthday is. And you were born 11,900 days before 9/11. So, you notice this detail. So we have here now then connected with this symbol, if we take the story of the Queen of Sheba, right? And it's going to talk about, the wealth and all of these things. And then we're going to have Solomon's wealth mentioned specifically in connection with 666. And so we subtract that from the year 1856. where we're going to count that 7 years to 1863, and we get that symbol 1190. Does that seem like a reasonable calculation? We're not picking and choosing. We're not just using brute force to get something significant.
It looks right.
I think it's pretty solid in that sense.
Yeah, it looks right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Angela put up a bit earlier Ezekiel 33. What was that? 31 to 33. Oh yeah, this sort of related to the people that won't read the book. They come unto me as a people cometh, they sit before thee as my people, and they hear thy words, but they will not do them. For with their mouth they show much love, but their heart goeth after their covetousness. And lo, thou art unto them as a very lovely song of one that hath a pleasant voice, and can play well on an instrument, for they hear thy words, but they do them not. And when this cometh to pass, lo, it will come, then shall they know that a prophet hath been among them. So in our understanding of how we've been studying, how we look at all of these messages, we're seeing that the message that needs to be proclaimed to Adventists, that God, I believe, is telling us, has to do with this message that we have uncovered in our studies, that is the message of the 2520. Now, we had said in the past, in this movement, we took some odd positions. We took a position one, no more public evangelism, right? Until such a time that public evangelism becomes relevant, right? Now, what would make public evangelism relevant again? What has to happen first?
We have to understand our message.
Okay, we have to understand it, and then we have to do what with that message? Who do we give it to?
The ancients at the house of God. Leadership.
Okay, well, we go first to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Haven't the leadership been bypassed?
I would agree that the leadership has in many ways been bypassed, but it's also been bypassed where we have not really truly understood our message.
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
we need
so-
to apply it to ourselves first.
Well,
And if you
definitely.
don't mind me reading what I've just looked up in the charts book on page
Okay.
27, Seventh-day Adventist Church formally established new prophecy chart made without the 2520 on it. An official 1863 chart reveals rejection of the 2520 is written and published in the RH January 26, 1864. Prophetic understanding is lost, and the church wanders into the wilderness. That's the direct quote.
Okay, who wrote that?
That's in the little charts book that I purchased in 2015. Truth Will Triumph Publishing.
Okay, but who wrote that? Like who's saying that?
It's just a statement in this book. I could have been Jeff. I don't know.
Okay.
Could have been Dwayne Dewey. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's kind of an interpretation. The church wouldn't know that they've done that particularly. Yeah. See, and I don't quite agree with that. It's partially true. That is, the church did reject the 2520, but they have no idea that they rejected it. I mean, the article. Oh, it's kind of interesting. You'd find this interesting, Dwight. I fed Uriah Smith's article, the article from January 26, 1864, into an AI program and asked it to analyze whether it was written by Uriah Smith or James White.
Okay.
What do you think it said?
I would presume Uriah Smith.
Yeah, it gave all the same arguments that you and I have given.
Right.
Yeah, it looked at the language. The language is nothing like James White. The use of Gesenius is nothing like James White. James White does not do that. The sentence structure is completely different. The vocabulary is completely different.
Right.
But many people believe that that James White wrote that article in 1864.
Do you have to feed all the information of James White into the AI and Uriah Smith's information all into the AI?
No, it knows everything.
How does it get the information from
It
James
gets the
White?
information from the Ellen G. White estates. It has all of the knowledge of mankind in it. It's not just it has all of that knowledge. It knows everything that man
Big
knows.
Brother is watching.
Well, yeah. So I mean, it's obviously a two-edged sword, right? There's some really bad things about AI, but
I was trying to figure out how he gets all that information, but you just told me.
because it just it compares it to everything James White wrote and everything Uriah Smith wrote. And it says, and it has the skill and the ability. It's really good with language because it's a language model, right? Large language model. So that's its primary strength, is the ability to analyze language. So it just does a grammatical and structural analysis of all of James White's articles and books and all of Uriah Smith stuff, and it says, no, this was not written by James White. I think it said like absolutely it was written by, I think it used the word absolutely. So sometimes it gets a little enthusiastic. But the point is, we know that people reject the 2520 based upon that article in January 26, 1864. But AI was quite clear that James White never rejected the 2520. So it gives evidence of why he didn't reject it. And AI also says Ellen White didn't reject it. And it goes into the history, too, of what was actually happening at the time and why James White sort of allowed those things to appear in the review that he didn't agree with. It's quite interesting. So the point is,
maybe you can share that with us, and then
yeah.
I would probably try to post it somewhere. Right now, I can't do anything with my big Asus, but I would comment. Even the devils believe and tremble, because I'm not a huge fan of AI. I can see people worshiping that thing.
Yeah, I look at it as a tool, like anything, like a word processor is a tool. What you have to be careful about AI is AI sort of reflects your own thinking. So, and it gets to know you, right? How you think and all the information you feed into it, it starts to think like, me, unfortunately. So, it's trying to meet your needs based on who you are. So if you were a terrible person, your AI is going to be a terrible person. So it's kind of like looking in the mirror, I guess.
My AI is going to be a terrible person? You mean I've got an avatar now?
Yeah. So, but you understand what I'm saying. It reflects back your own thinking. But when you if I feed it stuff like just asking it a question out of the blue instead of on a common chat, it knows some of my background, but it's not going to necessarily tell me what I want to hear. And I can go on AI anonymously. I can't save those chats that I have with AI when I just do it through a browser and I'm not signed into AI. But I can still do that and ask, and then it doesn't know who I am at all. And so I can get sort of a fresh perspective on something. But it does a lot of mathematical analysis and stuff like that too, of probability. So I've used it a lot to try to explain, well, feeding in our dates and our the papers and so forth and the studies that we've had, and say, what is the probability that these things happen by chance? And basically it says it's not possible. So it can just do a statistical analysis. But The real problem with AI is that people are going to become very lazy. They're not going to learn how to think for themselves. They're already to that point, but it's just, some people just let the AI do the thinking for them. So if you're not a thinker, your AI is going to reflect that in how you ask questions and how deep you go. If you're somebody who wants to know the truth, AI can be a useful tool. But anyway, going back to what you're talking about with Uriah Smith and the 1863 chart. So the position that FFA took, I stood in opposition to that position regarding the 1863 chart because of Joseph Bates' statement, right? That is, Joseph Bates is basically saying, this is from God, but it's not serving the purpose that you think it is serving. It's a message to a rebellious house. So there's a partial truth. Obviously, the 2520 is rejected in 1863. They don't realize that they've rejected it because they haven't even considered it, really. Sure, I remember some articles 7 years ago, but nobody's thought about it since. Yeah, Jeff?
It's just not a deliberate rejection, right? A knowingly rejection?
Yes. Yeah. And so it's a hidden rejection. And so God hides the 2520 prophetic mirror in the week of Christ on the chart. So that the fact that week of Christ study is there on the chart for us to see. And that opens up so many different things. So back in 2014, 2013, when I was studying, that's when I came to understand the 2,604 years and how that fit in with the 1863 chart. I've told that story before. It comes from this study of the 1863 chart that then I understood the prophetic mirror. And it was interesting too, because I presented a study at Colin's study when he still lived in Edmonton. And, at the end of the study, Colin said, because I presented this 2,604 years and how it all fit together. And Colin, at the end of the study, he had been making a funny smile on his face the whole time I was presenting. And then he said, well, look what I found this week. And he had the same study, basically, the 2,604 years of the prophetic mirror. So, which was to me, a verification that, I was on the right track at that time. That somebody else saw something. But we now know that we can take this story of the Queen of Sheba and we can place it there in that history where the church is confronted with this message. And we would say, well, this probably is 1863. And then we subtract the 666 shekels of gold. Is it shekels or what is the measurement?
Talents.
Talents, right? Like shekels would not be very much. Talents of gold.
It would take 20 gerahs for a shekel?
Yeah, but this is talents, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this is going to be, I'm on the wrong chapter. That doesn't help. Yeah, so talents. So 600, 6 talents. So 666 talents of gold. So we got that number of the mark of the beast, right? The 666. And we know that it's a symbol. What is the symbol of 666 primarily referring to? We always think about the mark of the beast, but where does it come from?
Say Rome.
Babylon.
Babylon, right? And it has to do with the sky, Babylonian astronomy, right? They divide the sky into 36 constellations. And if you add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, all the way up to plus 36, you get 666. So there's the Babylonian magic square where you have, 36 squares. Alberta, we have the roads in the country divided into townships by 6 miles by 6 miles, so 36 squares miles is a township, right? Comes from Babylonian surveying of the land, dividing of the land. So it's a symbol that goes back to Babylon. And we know that Miller used it to refer to the transition from pagan to papal Rome. But we connected it also with the 666 years of Jehoiachin's captivity, connecting Leviticus 26, the siege of Jerusalem, where Jehoiachin is taken captive, to 666 years to the siege in 70 AD. And so it's a transition from Babylon to pagan Rome to papal Rome. That's the symbol. So in our history, what would the 666 talents of gold represent if we're looking at Adventist history, if we're putting it there at that time? So they rejected the 2520, and do they get a Babylonian captivity?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's going to happen to Adventism, right? Basically, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is not Babylon. Just like the Jews, the Jewish church, the Jews are not Babylon. Jerusalem's not Babylon. But can Jerusalem be in Babylonian captivity? Can Adventism be in Babylonian captivity? Yes.
Yes, definitely.
We are in Babylon captivity.
So the idea of calling people out of Babylon to call them out of the Adventist church makes no sense. What you're calling them to do is to be Seventh-day Adventists, to come out of Babylon, not because the Seventh-day Adventist church is Babylon, but because it's in captivity. And that's a much different idea, right? It's a lot different to be Babylon or to be in Babylonian captivity. And for some reason, people never seem to distinguish this when they talk about the apostasy of the church and the church is Babylon and so forth.
Well, the Lord will move them to leave the stinking corporate structure with all its insanity. I mean, he did me. I didn't want it. Like, I noticed things were wrong right from the beginning. And I can't go back there. I mean, he would have to really impress me before I would enter one of the, I can't even go to the churches around here, and not that they're SDA. It's the same problem. I just don't want to face all that pollution.
But the issue is there's not even going to be a corporate structure to leave.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to that in many ways. I mean, I'm sad for the people that are going to be disillusioned and probably destroyed, you know. But I mean, I left a whole lot of cults before I left this one.
Yeah, it probably forced people to start studying, you know, if that happens.
Well, for some people, it's
amen.
But yes, hopefully people study, you know. But anyway, we can see here in this history of Adventism that the church is beginning to take the steps of rejecting the foundation of the message, or they've rejected the foundation. So when the third angel's message comes, they're going to reject that message. So the second generation of Adventism from 1888 to 1919 is a message of the rejection of what happens after you reject the third angel's message. You end up with the books of the New Order, right? And then 1957, with the last book of the New Order, you get the fourth generation. And that generation is the period of darkness. That's Thyatira, right? It's an apostasy. And then we have the time of the end. So what we should be seeing as we go through this story of Solomon is to see that history. Right? So often, you know, when we study, and remember, I haven't gone through this. We're working through this together. But we did the same thing when we did the book of Judges. And the book of Judges was focused upon the second angel's message, arrival, right? That's what Judges was addressing. It was addressing this movement in the context of July 18th and Parminder's apostasy and the Alpha and the Omega within the movement. You know, what happened with the July 18, 2020 prediction. And we had made some, well, I'm going to use the word guesses, but basically it was just the Holy Spirit. And when we started looking at Judges chapter 2, we took that structure and recognized it led us to 2023. So it brought us to the time that we were in, and that was an application of the book of Judges that God was giving us at that time. So now I believe that as we're looking at Solomon, after going through Saul and David and Samuel as well before that we have an understanding of this structure, that there is definitely a repeat of history, but the main focus here in studying Solomon is not studying the movement, it's studying Adventism. And I think that the purpose or the reason behind it is that we have to give a message to Seventh-day Adventists. And God is going to have to, in his providence, show us how to do that and open up the doors so that that can occur. So, well, I'll let you in on a bit of a secret of so I've been a bit discouraged over this message to some degree. Not the kind of discouraged that gets me depressed, but just the kind of when you feel like you're spinning your wheels, like you're not really getting anywhere. Have any of you ever experienced that?
Very often.
Yeah, you're not really sure what to do, and you feel like you're in a holding pattern and you're waiting. But what I think has happened, at least, I notice I'm probably a little brighter, like happier than usual, and I'm not on any kinds of drugs or anything like that, so don't think that. It's just I feel like there's a change. It's sort of like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm very optimistic about what's going to be happening. I have no idea what's going to happen. But as we have moved through these studies, and I would say the lowest point was on January 11th. That was a really low point for me personally. Probably hard to tell. Maybe if you go back and watch the video, you might pick up on it a little bit. But, in just spending time reviewing what God has shown us, that's what I've been doing, going through a lot of personal introspection. So like my whole life, and writing a book, so I'm being a bit introspective. Went through all my poetry, kind of put that together. I'm going to publish that on Academia, all of my poems, which is quite a bit of stuff. And so I just kind of feel a bit more, well, maybe the word is extroverted, just not so much like a hermit, because I feel that God is going to be doing something. And it's not just because I have a feeling. My feelings are not my regular feelings. They're more just perception, right? So I perceive, based on what we're studying and how things are unfolding, that God is going to begin doing a work that we're not going to be in that holding pattern that we've been in for quite a long time. You understand? Do people agree with me? Is there any sort of observation people have about that?
There have been so many things that have been being revealed over the last several months, but they are so fragmented that we have not been able to truly put together a good picture of really what's going on or what's happening.
Okay.
Now, we are told to collect all light, no matter how small. And that's been one of the things that we have been doing. There are so many different points that you have looked at, Stephen has looked at, all of us have looked at. And there's a reason behind all of this, but our minds, our finite minds, are not capable yet of being able to make sense of all of it.
Yeah. So, I've been basically collating all of everything that we've studied, right? And I use AI to do that. So the useful tool that AI is that it can sort out a bunch of data and information and sort of catalog it and It doesn't make decisions for me, right, about it, but it can just say, like, for instance, with my poetry, I can put my poetry in there and it can kind of organize it, and it can give an analysis of the poems, just kind of standard poetic analysis and so forth, instead of me having to go through and do that all myself, right? Which takes a lot of time. Now, it still takes time because you have to go through it and you interact with AI because it makes mistakes and you have to correct it and you have to read things over and you have to write things again in your own words. But it's definitely a useful tool to analyze all of the things that we have studied. So, and as I do that, I get a much clearer picture of what it is that we have, how it all fits together. So now, obviously, I've spent a lot of time learning these things right from the very beginning. So I have a pretty cohesive picture of all of the information that we've studied, and lots that never shared because it's just too detailed. But this has to come together in a way that it can be understood, not just by us who have spent all this time, but by other people who are not going to have the opportunity of time that we have, right? That we have had, and the experience that we have had. And if you think about the parallel of this movement with the Millerite movement, you're going to have, James and Ellen White, they're going to have gone through the disappointment. And in 1850, they see the movement falling apart. They have all of this light that God has given them. And Ellen White is going to be told that James is going to have to write this paper, right? The Present Truth, which later becomes the Review and Herald, the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald, right? And so we were in that period as we looked at things with what was happening in the movement. But something is happening in connection with that history. So I believe that God is going to open up these doors in his providence for this message to go. And so what I've been trying to do is just as much work as I can intellectually to pull all of these things together so that I can process them into a format that other people can access. And, his table of history is a valuable tool, but it's a big document. Right? It's something that once somebody starts to understand this message, they can go through table of history. I've been working on trying to figure out how to, teach it to different types of people, guitar students, things like that. But you can see that this makes sense of how we're approaching things. Now, our personal studies, that was the thing to me. So we have our personal individual studies, which all of us will always do. Then we have these online studies. And I guess, on January 11th, I was kind of wondering, are we going to continue these? Are these going to end in some way? Not something I would want to end. But just, was there interest? And there seemed to be, I think we had some days there where just was meeting around, and then, there's so few people in the studies. And I was wondering, well, maybe, people aren't watching the videos and there's just so much videos, and maybe we should take some time off or something like that. But then, things happened, and a lot of prayer, of course, about the situation. But I do believe that God is going to open this up so that our studies are going to end up being a bit more of an outreach rather than just us studying together. Even though, there's always been the outreach part of it. And I think part of it will be going to the studies on the Godhead on Sabbaths. I think that's because it's such a hot issue. And again, I'm not like a sensationalist type of guy who, wants to do a study just because, we can get lots of people watching our videos because we got the hot topic of the day, I'm not a Candace Owens, person who's, chasing the algorithm. What we care about is the truth. And so Angela's wrote something about Three Angels Message Fellowship. Should invest in publishing, even getting a printing press. Yeah, I don't think we would ever do the printing press thing, but definitely the message has to get out, however that's going to be done. I think physical printing is kind of passe. There's not a lot of people who read books anymore, or periodicals or magazines, right? We're old fashioned, so we like books, I guess. But even me, I read.
But if you're in a mall, say, or if you're walking along the streets or something, I don't think there are too many people that are going to pull out their whatever smartphone or whatever the heck they're on to look this up. I mean, they still take tracks and things.
Yeah, there is something to be said for physical things, because there's so many things clamoring for our attention, right? People are distracted all the time, So in the digital world, there's all kinds of things distracting people from focusing on something. But we know that God can use all different kinds of means. So whatever is going to happen. But a printing press, you don't need a printing press. You just get a printer to print it. Printing is cheap. Printing presses are expensive.
I know, but I think big.
Yeah, you can you get a good photocopier and you can print. Things have changed. The world has changed from 20 years ago. But anyway, the point is the message itself and how we do our studies and all of those things are going to change over time. So in some ways, I don't like to use the word excited, because I'm not really an excitable person. And I would actually say the last thing I really want to do is a bunch of work, right? So I'm naturally lazy because I'm a human being. So, but I feel that there's going to be a lot of work for us to do. Dwight, you have a comment?
Well, I'm stepping back just a couple of minutes. If you're not the Candace Owens, then are you the Megyn Kelly?
I'm not any of them. But I'm just saying there's people, they chase the algorithms.
Of course.
I use Candace Owens because it's kind of funny, because she's the worst example of that, or the best example, I guess, of that bad example. But yes, people often, on YouTube, they get caught up in, just trying to get viewers, right? They look at and they do every strategy they can to get more people to watch and get more subscribers, and sensational titles and flashy videos or whatever it is, and that of course is not me, and I actually just don't believe in that, right? It's not just that it's not my personality. It's to me it's part of deception, right? I really believe that the Holy Spirit has to be allowed to work to lead the correct people, to add to the church daily such as should be saved. Where, man's machinery, man's plans and schemings, they're counterproductive in the long term. They might seem to work in the short term. You get people out to an evangelistic series because you had a sensational, ad campaign, and you got people out there, and you managed to manipulate a bunch of people to get baptized to become Seventh-day Adventists. Sure, most of them are going to be gone in a few months, or even in a couple of weeks. And then the ones that do survive, they're going to end up seeing that the church is in apostasy and they got brought in by sensationalism. So they're going to then leave the church following other sensationalism. Maybe it'll be Adventist sensationalism. So they'll be, part of an offshoot group or something like that, or some independent ministry preaching against the church. So the church really didn't do any good, right? And that's how people operate. People think very short term, and there's a lack of trust in God. But I really believe that God is going to be doing some things. And even in some of the, the disappointments that we have in our lives, the things that we think are going to happen, or the trials that we face. But these are all God's providences. He's using these things. One is to prepare us, but also to provide the time when those things need to happen. And so waiting on the Lord can be difficult, but if you do it correctly, it actually prepares you for what's going to happen. And that's the most important thing, is in regards to this message, is that we're prepared for what's coming upon this earth, and that we'll be equipped to give this message. So when we look at Solomon's great wealth right there, that 666 talents of gold, and we think about the church and this great rich treasure that it has, but we don't recognize that it's really, Babylonian mysticism, right? So how do we sort through all of that? One is without becoming, bitter and angry towards the church, self-righteous and self-justifying by looking at the sins of others and imagining ourselves better than others. How do we keep ourselves from false doctrines? How do we not get caught up in the politics of the day, in the emotions that are going around? I really believe that this message, what we have studied and how we have studied, is what preserves us from a lot of these errors. So anyway, any final comments? I know I kind of went off on a rant there, but
just with the 666. So we know that Solomon reigned 40 years. And so it was 666 talents per year. Now, if you were going to say that was consistent throughout the whole 40-year period, it would equate to 2520 times 10 plus 1440.
So it's 2520. Now, and that's just simply because, so I'd have to think how that works. Yeah, okay, anyway, so it ends up being 26,640. So that's 2520 plus 1,440. Right. Okay, interesting.
Is it, I suppose you could do it that way. No, that wouldn't be right. Yes, it's 2520 times 10 plus 1,000.
Yeah, that's what I meant. 2520 times 10 plus the 1,000.
Yeah.
440. Yeah.
You've maybe a wee bit of if you've an extra 6 in there, maybe a symbol of 26th day, 4th month, I'm thinking as well.
Okay, I did 666 times 40. I got 26,640.
Yes.
Yeah. So
maybe you have a 264 maybe symbol there almost.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. And then if I subtract 1,440, 25,200. Yeah. Yeah. So we have these fractalized symbols again and again. Okay. So thanks for that, Stephen, and thanks for everyone, all your comments. So let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, again, we are so grateful. We know, Lord, that we are unfit to do the work that you have prepared for us to do, but we know, Lord, that you can equip us. And we just pray that we can spend time studying your word and understanding it. I pray for each person that you can bless them and give us wisdom as we continue to study individually and make decisions. And we ask that you can bring us together again to study these things. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.